Okay, let's take a deep dive into a story that, on the surface, looks like internal drama at a major law firm, but actually tells us something pretty significant.
Yeah, about political pressure and, the legal profession right now.
It happened very recently, May 23rd, 2025. Picture this. Paul Weiss, one of the most, storied, powerful law firms in the U.S., over 150 years old. Suddenly, four of their absolute top rainmakers, litigators handling huge cases, companies like Google, Amazon, they just walk out the door.
And they didn't just leave quietly, right? They announced they were starting their own firm.
Exactly.
And this all comes right after Paul Weiss made this highly controversial deal with the Trump administration.
Precisely. We're talking about real heavy hitters here. Names like Karen Dunn, Bill Isaacson, Jessica Phillips, Jeannie Rhee.
Yeah, names you'd recognize if you follow big legal fights or politics.
Definitely. Dunn, for instance, co-chaired litigation at Paul Weiss, represented massive tech clients, prepped political figures for debates.
And Rhee was key in the Mueller investigation, headed their D.C. office.
Right. Isaacson and Phillips, renowned trial lawyers who'd only joined Paul Weiss a few years back.
So the sources you've shared, they paint a pretty detailed picture here.
They do.
We need to piece together, what exactly happened to Paul Weiss, understand who these lawyers are, why they left now. Unpack the specifics of that deal Paul Weiss struck with the Trump administration, explore the intense reaction in the legal world.
Right.
And figure out what this whole saga signifies for the independence of the legal profession, really.
So our mission in this deep dive is to make sense of all that information for you, highlighting what's most important.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with what seems to be the trigger. This pressure put on Paul Weiss by the Trump administration. What did that look like, according to the sources?
Well, the sources describe the administration specifically targeting Paul Weiss. There was an executive order.
Targeted? How so?
And it wasn't arbitrary. The order cited several reasons, including the firm's association with Mark Pomerantz.
Pomerantz, from the Manhattan DA's investigation into Trump.
That's the one. It also mentioned the firm taking on pro bono cases related to January 6th.
Okay.
And it even went so far as to criticize the firm's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, their DEI initiatives.
That sounds like a very direct attack. But what were the actual teeth of this executive order? How could it potentially destroy a firm, as the chairman reportedly put it?
That's where it gets really intense. The order was designed to make it almost impossible for Paul Weiss to operate effectively, especially for its corporate clients.
Oh, what could it do?
Sources indicate it threatened things like revoking security clearances for personnel, locking federal contracts, not just for the firm, but potentially for companies that use the firm.
So hitting their clients, too.
Exactly, and restricting lawyers from interacting with government officials, even entering government buildings.
That's huge.
Yeah. As the firm's chairman, Brad Karp, is quoted saying, "It could easily have destroyed our firm."
Okay, that's immense pressure direct from the government. And Paul Weiss, unlike some other firms we might talk about later, they didn't immediately sue.
No, they didn't. They negotiated. They struck a deal instead of fighting the executive order in court.
Right.
And this deal was announced late March 2025. Paul Weiss agreed to make concessions to get the executive order pulled back.
What kind of concessions? What were the terms?
The core terms reported in our sources are quite striking. First, the firm pledged to provide the equivalent of $40 million in pro bono legal services over Trump's term.
$40 million. Directed where?
Directed towards causes agreed upon with the administration. Things like assisting veterans, promoting fairness in the justice system, combating anti-Semitism.
Okay. And this is where a major part of the controversy comes in, right? The DEI part.
Exactly. The sources also report that the deal, controversially, included Paul Weiss agreeing to end their specific DEI policies.
End them completely.
End those specific policies and audit their hiring practices. That's what's reported.
Okay.
There was also a reported requirement for a statement acknowledging wrongdoing by that former partner, Mark Pomerantz.
Even though Pomerantz himself, I believe, denied doing anything wrong.
Correct. He denied any wrongdoing.
So, connecting this to the bigger picture, this deal must have caused waves.
Oh, absolutely. It was met with immediate and widespread criticism within the legal community.
Like what?
What were people...
You saw terms thrown around like shameful surrender or calling it humiliating.
Ouch.
Yeah. Critics argued it was basically a capitulation to government pressure. They questioned if a firm that wouldn't fight for itself against what many saw as an unconstitutional order could really be trusted to fiercely represent its clients.
That's a fair point. But Paul Weiss defended the deal, right? What was their side of it?
Yes, they did. They framed it as a matter of necessity, literally for the firm's survival and to protect their client relationships.
Survival.
They argued that even fighting it in court, a long legal battle, would have been too damaging. They said clients were already indicating they might leave. So the business pressure was real.
Immense. The chairman's point, according to the sources, was that the firm would not be able to survive a protracted dispute with the administration. It was presented as a pragmatic choice, under extreme duress.
Okay, so they make this incredibly difficult, very controversial deal in late March. Fast forward just a couple of months.
And boom, May 23rd.
That's when those four partners come back into the story. Dunn, Isaacson, Phillips, Rhee.
Precisely. May 23rd, they announced they're leaving Paul Weiss.
And the firm's public statement was gracious, but behind the scenes.
Sources close to the situation indicate their departure is directly linked to this Trump deal.
What specifically about the deal pushed them out, according to the reporting?
The reporting suggests that while these four partners might have, maybe initially, supported the firm's decision to make the deal out of genuine concern for its existence,
Okay.
they ultimately felt constrained by it.
Constrained how?
They reportedly wanted the ability, the freedom, to pursue litigation against the Trump administration and its policies. And they felt they couldn't do that effectively without potential conflicts of interest or sort of the perceived limitations imposed by the deal Paul Weiss had struck.
So starting their own firm gives them that independence back.
That seems to be the idea. Complete freedom to litigate as they see fit.
That raises a really important question about the broader context here. Was Paul Weiss, the only firm feeling this heat?
Oh, not at all. This wasn't an isolated incident. Far from it.
Really?
Yeah, the sources detail a pattern. The Trump administration apparently used executive orders and presidential memorandums to target several other major law firms, too.
Like who?
Firms like Perkins Coie, Jenner & Block, Wilmer-Hale, Sussman Godfrey. Big names. They'd reportedly faced similar threats or actions.
Okay, so what did those firms do? Did they also make deals?
No, and this is where it gets really interesting. It highlights the difference in response.
Okay.
Instead of negotiating, those other targeted firms sued the administration.
They fought back in court.
Yes. They argued these orders were unconstitutional attacks designed to intimidate the legal profession and undermine the rule of law.
And how did the courts react to that approach? Did it work?
By and large, yes. The courts sided with the firms. Judges, including appointees from both parties, issued rulings that blocked or overturned Trump's orders.
So the courts saw it the same way the firms did?
Often, yes. Calling them unconstitutional abuses of power, serious threats to the justice system. So Paul Weiss really stands out among the firms that were directly targeted by an order.
As the one that negotiated rather than litigated.
Exactly, as its primary response, yes.
But the sources mention a larger group of firms, maybe not directly targeted by orders, but who still settled or made deals.
Yes, that's a crucial detail. Sources indicate there were about 9 major law firms in total.
9.
Including huge names like Skadden, Latham & Watkins, Kirkland, and Ellis, that either faced direct orders or made preemptive deals, seemingly to avoid them.
Preemptive deals, wow.
Yeah. And collectively, these firms reportedly committed close to $1 billion in pro bono work directed towards administration-approved causes.
$1 billion.
Close to it, yeah. And, like Paul Weiss, reportedly made other concessions, including agreeing to end DEI policies.
That just shows the sheer scale of the administration's pressure campaign across big law.
It really does.
And the reactions from the wider legal community, you said they were strong?
Incredibly strong, based on the sources. You had law school deans, the American Bar Association, thousands of lawyers, law students.
All speaking out.
Publicly condemning the administration's actions. They saw it as a direct attempt to intimidate the profession.
Intimidate them how?
To prevent lawyers from being willing to represent clients, especially unpopular ones, against the government.
A chilling effect.
Exactly. They view it as a fundamental threat to the independence of the bar. Some associates reportedly even resigned from firms that made deals.
Resigned in protest.
Yes, seeing it as sacrificing the rule of law for the firm's own self-preservation.
And what's the administration's reported view on all this pushback?
Well, as quoted in the sources, their stance is essentially the law firms have to behave themselves, and that big law continues to bend the knee to President Trump because they know they were wrong.
Okay, so back to the 4 Paul Weiss partners Dunn, Isaacson, Phillips, Rhee, their reported plan is clear. Start a new firm, free from these constraints.
That's right. To potentially take on cases directly against the administration?
That's the reported motivation, to create a firm where they have complete freedom to pursue litigation against the administration and its policies without the baggage of the Paul Weiss deal.
This entire series of events, I mean, from the executive orders and threats to how different firms reacted, the deals made, and then this departure, it really lays bare the immense political pressure on these big law firms.
Yeah, it's a very public illustration of firms caught between, their business interests and their professional obligations.
It absolutely highlights a fundamental tension, doesn't it? On one hand, yeah, a law firm is a business. It needs to survive, serve its clients.
Of course.
But on the other, lawyers and law firms have this critical role in upholding the rule of law, ensuring people and companies can get independent legal representation.
Yeah.
Even against the government.
And this situation just forces that tension right out into the open.
Mm-hmm.
So what does all of this mean for you as someone trying to understand complex stories like this one? It shows how political pressure campaigns can ripple through powerful institutions in unexpected ways.
Yeah, affecting everything from internal firm policies like DEI to who decides to leave and start something completely new.
And it really underscores the concerns raised by those legal experts and judges we mentioned.
Definitely. If law firms feel they can be targeted or punished for representing certain clients or even for their internal policies,
right,
what impact does that have on their willingness to take on politically sensitive or controversial cases against the government down the road?
Exactly. It leaves us with a provocative thought to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. What does it truly signify for the health of the rule of law, for the justice system, when powerful institutions feel they have to make deals with the government just to ensure their own survival?
And thinking about that, how might this kind of pressure ultimately influence who actually gets effective legal representation in these complex, politically charged cases moving forward?
It's a challenging balance, isn't it? Between a firm's commercial viability and its essential role in an independent legal system, something definitely worth thinking about.